This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
I recently returned from my summer vacation. As I was driving back to work, the thought occurred to me, well, I guess it's back to reality. During this trip, there were so many moments of just being completely present, peaceful, contented, and full of joy. Then out of the blue, a new thought occurred to me. It's not back to reality now that my vacation was over. I was escaping reality now. This little insight reminded me of the fact when I experienced deeper feelings such as joy, peace, and contentment, which seem to be more common on vacation, I am experiencing my true nature in those moments. I am present to life in those moments. I am feeling the truth. When I go into my head about what is missing from the moment, what could be better, or what should or shouldn't happen, I lose my connection to those natural feelings. All those nice feelings I had didn't come from the cruise ship, the food, the friends, or where I was in relationship to the Earth's equator. Those deeper feelings were always there. They never left me. I left them. I had fallen right into the trap of thinking my feelings following the vacation were a natural response of what happens when you get back to reality, when in fact, it was my thinking fooling me, secretly helping me escape reality. How comforting it is to realize we don't have to be anywhere or go anywhere to experience vacation feelings. So from now on, back to reality is not such a bad thing, writes Jamie. Valeria Teles interviews Jamie Sellers, LICSW-PIP, a licensed clinical social worker with a private therapy and coaching practice. Jamie Sellers, LICSW-PIP, is a licensed clinical social worker with a private therapy and coaching practice. Over the course of his 20-plus years in the field, he's worked with a wide range of populations, such as children with severe emotional or behavioral challenges, people diagnosed with severe mental illness such as schizophrenia, and those who struggle with anxiety, depression, and addictive or compulsive behaviors. He has also spoken at national conferences for change professionals on topics such as the health of the helper. His passion in life is to serve others by clearing up simple misunderstandings that lead to complex problems by pointing people towards their innate source of wisdom, clarity, and common sense. A part-time professional magician on the side, he also uses the art of magic to enhance his teaching. In this conversation, he will shed light on the default nature of mental well-being through sharing his own insights and personal and professional stories. He is currently a practitioner member of the Three Principles Global Community, a nonprofit organization committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, as discovered by Sydney Banks, to people throughout the world. Meet Jamie at innatehealth.solutions. Here is the interview with Jamie Sellers.
In your own words, who is Jamie Sellers?
Well, first I would say that it would depend on when you would ask me that question. So,
Right.
and I've found that to answer that question is really more about trying to figure out who I'm not. It's that stripping away of these beliefs about myself. But in the world of form, I guess you could say I'm a husband and a father, and I'm a social worker by trade, and but work with people to try to help point them in the direction of their own wisdom and their own innate health. I'm a magician on the side.
Yes, I know. That's fun.
There's I use that a good bit in my work, and I'm a jokester. Like to sometimes almost inappropriately my humor, but yeah, there's a lot about me, I guess you could say. That's a constant exploration.
Thank you so much for doing the work you do and for expressing yourself the way you expressed now. Yeah, the word of form. I love that. So I guess my second official question is about the purpose of the human experience. What do you think that is?
Oh gosh, the purpose of the human experience. I feel like we're all on this journey to get back to who we really are. And I think that essence of who we really are is really just the same. It's like we're all the same in that way. The path back to who we really are is different for everybody, but it takes many different forms. But I think the purpose of the human experience is to love, is to connect with people, to bring joy and light into the world. There's in my mind, I'm thinking of sort of personal, like in the personal world of the human experience, and then more in the impersonal of the human experience. So, but I think it ranges from just ultimately getting back to our connection with God.
But how did you come to these understandings, Jamie, as of today?
Yes. So it's been quite a journey of unlearning, I guess you could say. I would say 20 plus years ago when I was in college, I had a real bad case of striving for more, better, and different. I was a seeker. I was the grass is greener syndrome was a diagnosis of mine, and I was constantly chasing the rabbit on the dog track. It's the dog chasing the rabbit on the dog track, trying to find happiness. And I was in a situation where I was just really distressed, dealing with a breakup of a relationship, and which I initiated, and then wanted to get back into the relationship. And the girl, she said, "You have to be happy with yourself before you can be happy with anyone else." I don't know if you ever heard that one. Yeah. And I was like, "But I am happy." Yeah. And of course, such a cliche. But anyway, in my desperation, I ran across a book in the bookstore, and something that really hit me hard. And it was essentially that all of my suffering was coming from me getting out of the moment, and I was getting into the future or into the past. And so the whole truth of that this moment is all there is, it hit me, and I just started laughing, and from that point on, I just continued to pull that thread, and over the years I've been introduced to the teachings of Sydney Banks, who I mentioned in the bio, the three principles, and I've been a practitioner and a teacher and a learner of the three principles for 20 plus years now. And so that's kind of how it started. What was interesting though, too, is that it wasn't something that I discovered. I was already a professional. I was a therapist right out of graduate school, and it was my personal journey, my personal seeking, that led me to this. It wasn't that I went to a professional training or I was seeking better ways to help people. It was something that I discovered in my personal growth, and then later started to think, I wonder if I could apply this in my work in mental health. So that's kind of how that played out.
Thank you so much for being open to life, Jamie, which means being open to yourself. You mentioned God earlier, the word God. What is your idea of what or who God is?
Yeah. So I grew up in in the Christian faith, and so that was, my background. I don't see God in the same way in terms of the form of the religion of Christianity that I used to, but I really see God as just this intelligence that's basically running life. It's who we are. It's everything. That's a really tough question because it's so big. It's hard to give it credit. It's the little things, and then it's the big things. It's the energy that's in this cup of water I'm drinking, and it's the power that turns a marriage around, or that wakes someone up to their alcoholism. It's just, I think as soon as we put a form on it, it loses its power. And so I know that sounds like a catch-all answer, but I use the term God. I live in the South in Alabama. I'm in the Bible Belt, and so I'm very comfortable using that terminology and speaking in terms of the Christian faith. However, I have a much more universal belief system around God at this time.
Another question is on healing. How would you describe what healing is, and what are some of the obstacles to healing?
That's great. So I think I'll use an example of. I'm going to just tell a quick story. So my son, when he was in high school, he broke his leg. He was out goofing off with his buddies and broke his leg and had to have a full leg cast on it. And he had to have surgery and had to have pins put in it. And now his leg healed. Okay. Now the doctors did not heal the leg. He did not heal the leg. In fact, the healing started as soon as the injury happened. The healing had started. The cast just protected it so that the healing could take place. I see healing as something that is a natural, God-given process that kicks in when we get out of the way of it. And so it's like there's a flow of healing that occurs. And when I say get in the way, it could be something physical, like picking at a sore, or it could be something mental, like ruminating and dwelling on a past trauma. Healing is trying to take place in the same way that a beach ball held underwater is trying to come to the surface. And so I see healing as this life is naturally moving in the direction of healing. And the question is, not what are we doing to heal, but what can we stop doing to prevent healing?
Is there such a thing as being ready to get out of the way and let the healing flourish?
Oh, yes. Yes. So it's just like, to use the example of the broken leg, there was a period of time when it didn't need to be messed with at all. It needed to just, after the surgery, it was a matter of just rest and not having any, stress to it. And then it got to where there was a time when he was ready to start rehabbing it, right? And so in my practice, there are some people who are not ready. They don't feel safe enough, and they're not ready to get out of the way of it. And so, and that's part of what I see my role as a helper is to be able to pay attention to their readiness, to be open to it when they are ready, and then guide them in that process, especially with children who I've worked with who've experienced severe trauma, sexual abuse, and that sort of thing. So I think that the world gets impatient and wants therapists want to like induce the healing,
Right.
and but they have to be ready, you know.
Yeah. All the things we see in this reality and all the chaos and the pain, the suffering, it's that something that reflects that most of us human beings are not ready to heal.
Well, I think that I think there's a misunderstanding about, and I'm going to speak mostly about emotional and spiritual health, but I think people misunderstand. The world as a whole has a misunderstanding about what they think their feelings are telling them. And so I often will tell people when I'm speaking to groups, people with addictions, that if the only thing they realized was that it's okay to feel bad, that would do wonders, because the reason they ended up in this situation is because they were trying to avoid feeling bad, or they were trying to make themselves feel good. Now, there's a reason we don't have therapy for 2 and 3-year-olds, because they don't care. They don't care about feeling bad. They experience the full range of human emotion, and they get over it really quickly. And so that's why children are so natural. They flow through life so naturally. And then we start to learn, we start to like get away from that as we get older. We start getting attached to certain feelings and avoiding certain, other feelings. And so it's really about becoming more like a child, and being okay with having bad feelings, knowing that they will pass. And so, and that's part of that healing process is allowing the some pain to come and go.
Yeah. Yeah, a billion times to that. What a beautiful message. Thank you for saying that, Jamie. Would you say that is a sign that would be the destination for emotional healing, to come to terms with that, with our own feelings, and create that space so they can be there?
Yes, I would say that if the world, or if society would slow down, that's the first thing, and allow themselves to feel, instead of trying to avoid but I want to emphasize that it's innocent, because I think sometimes it can sound like I'm saying this to you, but I'm speaking to myself, because on a daily basis I find myself trying to avoid a feeling in some way and getting lost. So part of being human. And so I've been learning this for 20 years, and every day I fall short from time to time. So I think it's innocent, but the innocence is what leads people astray and has them really trying to fix things or figure things out that doesn't need to be figured out.
So in a way, it's taking all those feelings too seriously. That's what we do, don't we? The content of the mind. Yeah. And when it comes to spiritual growth, what is the destination for that? If there is one, what is your vision for being there spiritually?
I would say just finding myself more and more present, more and more in touch with the moment, and really more, not necessarily in the driver's seat, but more being lived as opposed to living. So it's being along for the ride, much like a child on a road trip. You're just enjoying the scenery, and you're not so concerned about with the maps.
Yeah. So true. Being in the moment. This is something that we hear a lot. Being here now. Is that something that has to do with focus and concentration? Or is an open awareness of being here?
Yes. No, I would say that being in the moment, being present is your mind is free, and there's not a contamination of the future or the past. So it's that space that we fall into when our mind gets really quiet. And it's the really the root of enjoyment, contentment, peace, joy, all of those things that we're looking for. They happen when we're in the moment, and our head isn't full of a lot of excessive thinking. And there's a lot, over the past several years, mindfulness has become a real, it's become real popular. And so I don't necessarily talk about it in that way. In my mind, I found that when you see that this moment is all there is, you don't need mindfulness to escape some scary future or some bad past. The realizing this moment is all there is, it just doesn't make as much sense to leave it.
Right. So true. Yeah, it really doesn't make sense. Although you have heard that before, that common sense is not as common as we would like it to be.
That's exactly right.
So I see that you connect healing to spirituality. It sounds to me, because the way you speak sounds very spiritual. Do you make that connection often?
Yes. Well, it depends on. I mean, I'm flexible in my teaching, so I can. When I'm working with some people, it can be like I've worked with people who are atheists and people who are really, really hardcore fundamental Christian clients, and I've found that there's a logic. There's a way of talking about things that's very logical and scientific that some people resonate with, and then there is a way of talking that's very spiritual and very and they're comfortable with that. So as we talk, it's driven more from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah.
But if you could hear me speak at another interview, and it might look totally different.
Yeah, the language will change, right? But it's the same thing, isn't it? We're just using different words.
That's exactly right.
But it's
That's
the same
exactly
thing.
right. It's like agua and water, and I mean,
Yeah.
still water, right? And the essence is the same, but we get caught up in our concepts. That's for sure.
You made me curious about your work as a magician. Do you integrate that to your work as a licensed clinical social work and therapist?
Yes,
You
and
do?
I would love to share a quick story about that, because this was something that really impacted me early on. I've been doing magic, sleight of hand, since I was in college, and I initially would use it as a way of breaking the ice and just getting rapport. But I started doing magic when I worked in I used to work in a psychiatric hospital for many years, and I would lead group on the adult unit. And you had people who were really sick, people with, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and people who were suicidal, people who were having panic attacks and substance abuse. Now, not to bring the conversation down,
Right.
but I want to give you some context.
Yeah.
So I would say it's group time, it's group time, and of course they're not. Some of them are there against their will, they're involuntarily there, and so I would start doing some card tricks, and if you walked in 5 minutes later after I started doing the magic, you would not be able to tell who had schizophrenia, who had bipolar, who was depressed, because they would all fall out of their conditioned thinking, and they would all fall into that space of feeling like a child, and their joy and their humor. They would, there were times when I would tell them, all right, y'all need to keep it down. Remember, we're in a psych hospital. Because they would just, their mental health was right below the surface of the waves, the tumult, the torrential downpour and the tumultuous waves. Right below the surface is their mental health, and it would come out when the magic would facilitate their their thinking getting quieter. So they would bring them into the moment and they would enjoy it. And it wasn't like they decided to enjoy it. It wasn't like they said, okay, I'm going to enjoy this. It just naturally happened. And that was when I saw firsthand that mental health is inside everyone, but they just don't know it. And they don't realize it. And so I could start pointing that out to clients, and they would go back into their heads right after, but I could use that as a vantage point to teach. It's like you've got court in an hour, and but you're feeling great. What how's that possible? And it's showing them that their experience is happening in the moment. It's not happening out there in the world.
It's almost in a way, when we are in the moment, we become embodied. We feel life as it happens right now, the sensations in the body. It's such an amazing, it's a magical, I use that word actually, it's a magical thing to be in the moment.
Really is.
Yeah, it is magic. That's interesting that you do that. And do you still apply that? I mean, I would call it technique, but it's a beautiful way of healing others. I mean, bringing them into the moment, which is highly healing anyway.
It is. It's. I use it. It helps with rapport, of course, working with teens or with kids. It also is a great way to point out the illusion, that of our experience, and there's a lot of more overt ways of using it to teach, but then oftentimes it's just a great way of just kind of getting people's heads in the right space for a conversation. And so once they've seen something like that, and what's really interesting too is that some people really hated it, but it was because they would. Their intellect would want to figure it out, and they would get stressed out about that. So that's the problem with techniques, is that there's going to be a limit to, it's not going to help everyone, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's why there are so many different kinds of techniques and healing modalities and different personalities. It helps a lot. There's a term you use, default nature. So talk to me for a moment about that. I know you probably have been talking already about it, but more specifically, how would you define this term?
Yeah. So, a computer has a default setting. I mean, you can reset the computer or your phone to like factory settings. And I see a default as just sort of, it's that basic fundamental state. And so, as I was saying about with the group that I was leading, when their thinking quiets down, when their mind, there's some space, and they really, it's like falling into a state of meditation. Their head is clear. Mental health automatically comes out as a default setting. It's like the sun behind the clouds. So the clouds cover the sun, and we'll say, well, the sun isn't, I wish the sun would come out. Well, the sun is already out. The clouds are obscuring it. And we don't have to get up there and wave the clouds away. We understand that when the clouds pass, the sun will peek through automatically. That is in my mind, the nature of the default nature of our mental health. We're all connected to this wisdom and this common sense, as you mentioned earlier. When we quiet down enough to listen to it, and it gives us what we need. We get the feelings we need, or we get the solutions, the ideas. And so what I loved about the working in the hospital is that we're really, the world is quick to say that there are certain people who have conditions that it's just not possible for them to be happy or be at peace. And when you can see someone who is involuntarily committed to a psych unit, and you see that person experiencing peace and joy and a sense of humor, even if it's just for 5 minutes, that's evidence that mental health is still at a default setting. And so my role is to draw that out and then also to point it out with clients and to help them see it for themselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, through
Does that make
experience.
sense?
It makes a lot of sense to me. From a spiritual perspective, yeah, absolutely. So let me mention some of the pieces that you have written. You have written many of them, articles, and you have sent some of them to me. And I love the way you write. I love the way you speak too, and the way you express this beautiful healing wisdom that you got to experience and know. But there's the one about the unknown. It's titled Faith in the Unknown. There's a passage there that caught my attention. It reads, "When struggling with life, a big step is to learn how to be comfortable with the unknown." So my question is, how does the unknown relate to having faith?
Yeah, I had realized that looking back that on my life, that times in my life when I really experienced a lot of joy and contentment and excitement, and there were times when I didn't know what was going to happen, whether it was a vacation to a place I'd never been, when I had my first child, getting a new job. There was just this being in this, I guess you could say we're always in the unknown, but there are times in our life when it's more on our mind. And so I have since discovered that what stresses them is not the unknown. It's the idea that they need to know or to figure it out. It's trying to figure out the unknown. And so that's where it gets tricky. COVID, the pandemic, there was a lot of discussion about, in these uncertain times, lots of emails would come out saying, in these uncertain times, well, life is always uncertain. This just pointed it out. It just kind of put it front and center. We're always in the unknown. And so, ironically, young kids, as I said earlier, they know way less than we do, and they are way more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you would think that
Yeah.
if knowing was going to help us feel better,
It's quite the opposite.
it's like the opposite, right?
So true.
So now I don't know if that answered your question, but that's something I feel it's a topic that is it's so I don't know. Sometimes it's kind of hard to grasp, but it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, it is. That's one of my favorite topics besides self-love, that unconditional love. Speaking of the unknown, I wanted to say something. Yeah, that makes me think about the idea of trust. Maybe that's why you kind of connect that to faith. I wonder when I'm trusting what's happening like this, which we call life. Yeah, I do agree that we have no idea what this is. When I trust that whatever is happening, it's happening and that's okay, however it unfolds. That's kind of where I am now. So I'm wondering, who am I trusting? That's a question that I often ask myself because I don't see anything that I'm trusting.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I think it's just knowing that, and it goes back to, I guess, to how you see the, God or this intelligence that has our back, that there's always a safety net. And I think it's that faith is it's not faith that things are going to work out the way that you want them to or that you think. It's just that faith that it works out even if it doesn't work out. And so it's going to look different. But even if it doesn't work out, something else, there's always a bigger picture in play. And so there's always another, there might be a learning that's in play. There might be some other healing that takes place that you didn't realize while you go through a difficult time. So I don't know. I think faith is just, it's that in a way, I would say that it's something that you know what it is. It's if you want to talk about like trust, it's like the opposite of fear. And imagine that you got on a roller coaster and you all right, let's say that you all right, you just said it. So let's pretend you don't like roller coasters, okay? All right, now imagine that you get on the roller coaster and then you found out the person tells you that particular roller coaster that somebody they had fallen off the day before. So your faith in the seatbelt working isn't very good. So you're going to have a lot of fear. Now, so a lot of people love roller coasters because they have faith. They're not thinking about falling out. They just enjoy the ride. And so now they wouldn't say, I have faith, I have faith. Because I think if you keep saying you have faith, then you know who you're trying to convince, right? So it's faith. It's almost like when we really have faith, this is going to sound a little paradoxical, but when we really have faith, it's not on our minds, you know? And so when we're trying to convince ourselves to have faith, we're getting in a little bit of fear and insecurity, and it's normal. I'm not judging it. I mean, I'm right there with it. But true faith is just this calm acknowledgement of what that things are going to be okay. And so that's just what I'm seeing right now about it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me from the standpoint of somebody who is trusting the idea of a God that stands there and is holding it all together. Or anything else. There's a lot of spiritual teachers that they have this idea of an entity. In my case, I don't, so I don't have anything. It's very much like a free fall. There's nothing there. There's no hope for anything else better than this or beyond this because this is already fulfillment to me. And that comes as a message every time. But then there's the paradoxical kind of idea of trust that it seems like I'm trusting something. It seems, but it's not in my head, as you said. I'm not thinking about it.
Right.
But it is here, and I have no idea what that is. Although it feels like that whoever we are, whatever we are, it's something that doesn't change. It was never born anyway in the first place. So it cannot be the body or the mind. So it's beyond
right.
that.
Our concepts will always fall short. That's for sure.
Yeah. So another piece that you have written that caught my attention is that you sent me, of course, is Crossing the Line. Talk to me for a moment about the message behind this piece, please, Jamie.
Yeah. So I think that that particular one, I was just talking about how we make up these conditions about what we think is worth getting upset about, you know? And so we have these conditions and it's a moving target. It doesn't, it's not the same all the time, but, and it's really just about perspective and what we would be complaining about would change based on the perspective that we have in the moment. And so, yes, I think that when I was talking about how people, you know, will have certain conditions that, well, this doesn't really cause me to feel, this doesn't make me angry. But when this happens, yeah, this would make me, it's like there's this arbitrary line that we draw that if you cross that one, oh, now we're talking about, so for me, it would be Alabama football, you know. So I'm feeling great until we lose in the championship game. And so I have that line that I've made up. You know, it's a made up line that we make up and draw.
So true. It resonated true, especially because I have interviewed so many people. And I remember somebody saying that about anger, that he was a very angry person for so long. And he found out that he was addicted to anger. That was the main problem. He had to get angry. That was the mental construct. That's how he operated. That caught my attention that time. I remember thinking it is true. We're addicted to a lot of our own ways of thinking.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that's us identifying with who we think we are. So if we think we're an angry person, then then we're going to strengthen that. Kind of strengthens the ego side of things. And so, and ego wants to strengthen itself.
Yeah, that's it. I love the way you write. It's really, really fun. And I was just thinking here, wow, what an amazing work, because it sounds very serious, healing and all these topics. But then you bring this lightness and playfulness to it.
Well, I appreciate you noticing that, because that is something that I would say a real value of mine is taking a lighthearted approach to working with people. And I think in most cases, people appreciate that, that I can be lighthearted and about sometimes serious things. There have been a few times when I had to learn to maybe be a little more reverent and a little more in terms of validating sometimes with people suffering. That's just because I just see the potential and the hope. And so sometimes it could get misconstrued as maybe being a little bit dismissive. So, but yes, I want to say I try to. I'm naturally pretty lighthearted. I got that from my family and from my dad, and so I think life is too important to take seriously.
Yes, that's another beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful message. We all need to know that and be reminded. That's a beautiful reminder today. The way you said before about something you said about reinforcing the ego, the false mental constructs we have, the belief systems and all those patterns. I really love the idea that we can do that too, like in our own lives with people around us and the work we do, you as a therapist. I know it's a very tricky thing because as a professional, then it's very different. But the idea of not reinforcing their false beliefs about themselves.
Right. Yes, and just being able to help them see that they aren't who they think they are, and they're not defined by what they've been through. And so, but it has to be experienced. I think as an intellectual idea, it's a little it falls short.
We're almost at the end, and I also wanted to mention the other piece that I really, really love. I have that one, actually. It's part of the introduction, Back to Reality, the one that you talk about, vacation. So you say during this trip, there were so many moments of just being completely present, peaceful, contented, and full of joy. Those deeper feelings were always there. They never left me. I left them. Yeah, the heart just opened when I read that.
Yes, that was a fun insight. After that cruise, I was headed back to work. I went on a cruise with my wife and some friends, and I just it was my first cruise, and I remember just kind of embarking on the unknown, heading out to sea, and then I could feel myself as we started heading back, kind of leaving the present, and started to think about getting back to the real world, so to speak. And so that was when I realized, as I was heading into work that following week, that it wasn't back to reality. I was actually in reality when I was in the moment.
Right. Which is always the case.
Well, and that's what I know I keep bringing up the group, but when I asked them, well, why did you enjoy the magic? And they would say, it gave me a good escape. It gave me an escape from reality. And that's when I would point out that, in fact, you're leaving reality when you start thinking about where you're going to go when you leave here, or when you're going to leave. You actually got in touch with reality when we were doing the magic. And so it's all kind of pointing back to that same point.
There's something else that you write that I really love. You said, the more intense and negative the feelings, the louder the wake-up call to look inside. That also caught my attention because it is so true. And then you have another article titled Control Issues, ? And then you say, Any issue is, at its core, a byproduct of misunderstanding. I love that. So you say a lot more, of course, than that. But
Well, that was really good. I'm surprised I said that.
right? Good reminder again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it is so true. Perception. We create our own reality. It's very small, very confined and limited.
Yeah, well, and I would say that it's not even so. I think sometimes when people hear that, they think that they can just start creating their own, like,
Oh, the opposite reality.
or alternate. Yeah, and I think it's really more that reality. I think reality is created within us. I don't necessarily think we're doing it. I think it is something that is happening inside, and so it is an inside out experience of life. But I used to say we create our reality, and then but what happened is people would start trying to think themselves into feeling better, or they would start trying to manipulate or manage their thinking to try to have better experiences. And so when you understand what's really happening behind the scenes, when you understand that your suffering is just an indicator that you've left the moment, that you've gotten in your head and gotten a little insecure, then you can allow those feelings to pass. But you don't have to make it happen. You don't have to think your way into a better experience of life. And so that's where the faith comes in, is having faith that you'll be okay if you just allow yourself to have a human experience and be curious about what's going on behind the scenes.
Yes, a billion times to that truth. I love your wisdom and how you communicate the message, Jamie. These profound messages. Thank you for being you, for being open to life.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate your questions help to draw that out.
I love doing this. So it comes with the territory. Let's see. I have a few more questions, the ending questions. But before that, would you like to add anything else that we didn't cover or discuss today?
Nothing's coming to mind in the moment.
Okay. So I'll ask you this question. How do you define success these days? What is to be successful to you?
Oh, well, I think success is just the feeling of having a purpose and being, for me, I see, for me, success is just being able to live a life with purpose, with heart, and to be of service to others, to be a light to others is what if I'm doing that, I feel like I'm successful.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. Thank you. And two more questions. What do you love most about being in a human body?
What do I love so much? That's a good one. I'm gonna throw the curveballs at the end here.
Right.
She's like, I'm really gonna put him in the unknown on this one.
That's right.
I think if you really think about it, the body is just this amazing machine. It's just, I get so fascinated with just how much is going on that we have no control over with our body. It's so fascinating that we have this thing that's so complex, the brain, and just even being able to use our even sight just blows me away that we can see things, So I think I just appreciate I'm just fascinated with how wise the body is.
Yeah, so it goes back to the wonderment, right, about what this is. Again, it's you have a very beautiful way and wise way of answering these questions, which I call them meaningful and deep. It fascinates me too, like some human beings are so open to life in such a beautiful way. So thank you again, Jamie, for being you.
Well, thank you.
What are 3 things you wish everyone to experience before they lose the body, before they die?
I think experiencing, 3 things. close connection and intimacy with another human being, the joy of playing with children, and let's see. Gosh, you know what? It's funny this comes to mind, but just a really, really good night's rest.
Yeah, that sounds very simple.
I wonder how common that is these days.
Yeah, so true. It makes a big difference. It's so true. That's amazing. Thank you so much again, Jamie, for being
You're welcome.
It's beautiful. Thank you again. And before we say goodbye, where can we find more information about you, your work, services, products, and future projects?
Yes. So I have a website. It's www.innatehealth.solutions. That's innate, INNATE, not in the number 8. So it's innatehealth.solutions. I'm also with a practice, where a coaching and counseling practice, Bevel and Associates, which is bevelandassociates.com. You Google that and you'll find that. That's a way to reach me. I do coaching online and in person in Alabama where I live, and then online. And so, yeah, that's probably the best way to reach me.
Wonderful. I'll have those links on your podcast profile. Thank you so much again, Jamie, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Jamie Sellers and his work, please visit innatehealth.solutions.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.